Hi, and welcome to Viewmaster Travels. Today we're visiting the locations from vintage Viewmaster reel SP9044, Las Vegas, from 1952. I took a trip to Vegas to find the vintage photos on this reel and see what's there now, and maybe learn some history along the way. I was really curious how much Las Vegas had changed in the last 75 years. Spoiler alert, a lot. Before we get to the first picture, a little Vegas history. In the early 1800s, Spanish trade routes went through a fertile valley in the desert between the Colorado River area and what is now Los Angeles. They named the area Las Vegas, or the Meadows, and used it as a resupply point on their way to California. In 1905, a new railroad was built from Los Angeles to Salt Lake City, with a principal stop in Las Vegas, establishing the city. Vegas's fortunes changed forever in 1928 when President Coolidge signed the Boulder Canyon Project Act, beginning the construction of the Hoover Dam. This brought thousands of workers to the area, and Las Vegas's population grew from 5,000 to 25,000 almost overnight. Enterprising locals thought it prudent to separate the workers from their paychecks, so they built theaters, bars, brothels, and casinos, even though much of this was illegal at the time. Perhaps realizing that one day the dam construction would be done and many of these people would leave, the state legalized gambling in 1931. Truth was, all the gambling was happening anyway, and I think the state was just tired of not getting their cut. If you legalize it, you can tax it. We pulled into downtown late at night and checked in at the Four Queens, and the next morning headed out into the desert heat to find our first goal. Fremont Street. So yeah, Vegas's main street is almost entirely unrecognizable now compared to 75 years ago. A lot of it is due to this giant digital display that was added in 1995, entirely covering several blocks of the street, making it feel like an indoor space and not an open road. But the Golden Nugget on the corner of Fremont and what would have been 2nd Street at the time is still there, and down the block is Vegas Vic, the neon cowboy installed in 1951, which used to say "Howdy, partner" every 15 minutes and wave his arm, but now seems to barely be hanging on outside a souvenir shop. Back when Vegas was founded, Block 16, which is the numbered city block on the original townsite map here, right next to the train depot, was the only place in town allowed saloons and brothels. They had to pay $500 a year for a license, starting the trend of vice being profitable for the city. And even when the state made these things illegal in 1910, little changed in Block 16. Gambling became legal years later in 1931, and the first licensed club was a speakeasy on Fremont Street, the Northern Club, who had to pay $5,640 a year to legally operate their 2 slot machines. Despite the fees, legitimate casinos on Fremont Street quickly overshadowed the shady ones on Block 16, and when the Army cracked down on prostitution in town, the remaining Block 16 establishments closed down. And today, Vegas's original den of sin is just a parking lot. At this point, I have to introduce someone, a man who seems to come right out of a Hollywood film noir movie, Guy McAfee. McAfee was the head of the Los Angeles Vice Squad, the Purity Squad, but secretly owned saloons and brothels right in the heart of LA. His underworld power grew until he became known as the Capone of Los Angeles, and eventually quit the Vice Squad in 1920. I guess crime paid better. But by the 30s, the feds were closing in, looking for their back taxes, and the New York mob was pushing into his territory. So when Prohibition ended and his speakeasies weren't needed anymore, McAfee turned his sights on Las Vegas. He bought a club on Highway 91 and named it the 91 Club, and also opened the Frontier Club on Fremont Street. Vegas was good to him, and eventually he opened his masterpiece, the Golden Nugget, in 1946, the very first place in Vegas constructed specifically to be a casino, and it was the most opulent and largest one in the world. The mob and Vegas go hand in hand, and I'd never heard of Guy McAfee before, but he seemed to influence everything we'd see on our trip. Anyway, if there's one thing Vegas is famous for, it's not the view of the street in the daytime, it's this. Bright lights of downtown Las Vegas. The first neon sign in Vegas was installed at the Overland Hotel in 1928, which was right across from the train depot on Fremont and Main. The new sign made quite the stir. Here's a picture of the hotel before the new sign, and here's one after. The new sign technology was very popular. 10 or 20 new signs were installed by the end of the next year, and when Hoover Dam was finished and electricity was basically unlimited, neon signs really took off. The Golden Nugget sign was one of the largest neon signs on Fremont Street, but it came down in the mid-'80s, and we wondered where all the old signs went. Turns out, many of them go to the Neon Boneyard at the Neon Museum, so we headed there to check it out. It's just north of Fremont Street, and you can take a tour through hundreds of old signs, including the Golden Nuggets. Here's a different viewmaster of the sign, and here, behind some debris, is the remains of that sign, and next to it was the lower part in the casino text. Standing next to it really gives you a sense of how large and complicated these signs were. Here's a viewmaster of the old Horseshoe Casino, whose old sign is in the boneyard now. And here's the Stardust Viewmaster, and the sign that was saved by the museum when the casino was imploded in 2007. Each of these signs was handmade, with hundreds of individual light bulbs and hand-curved neon glass. But today, all the signs in Vegas are LED, and there's just a handful of people who even know how to work neon anymore. For now, here's our next goal. El Rancho, Las Vegas. As you can see, like Block 16, El Rancho is now an empty lot, and it wasn't in Las Vegas at all. The El Rancho Resort was built just outside town on Highway 91, what would have been barren desert at the time, by Thomas Hull, who owned the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. He saw how many people were driving from Los Angeles to Vegas along 91 and figured they may be happy to stop a few miles sooner at his elaborate resort. Plus, building it out of town let him avoid paying the city taxes. Ironically, El Rancho's manager was none other than Guy McAfee, who was very familiar with tax avoidance strategies. His 91 Club was just down the road, even further out of town. This was the very beginning of large casino resorts being built out of town along the highway, which McAfee nicknamed the Strip because it reminded him of Sunset Strip back home. El Rancho had what they called a suburban design, lots of grassy areas and separate cottages you could drive right up to. It had a giant neon windmill, and their advertising made sure drivers would stop at the sign of the windmill. There were so many drivers coming to Vegas from California that one of the most famous signs in town was built for them, the Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas sign. This sign was installed in 1959 at the very southern end of the Strip, welcoming you to a town that's still 4 miles away. And until the freeway bypassed it in the mid-'70s, it would have welcomed everyone driving to Vegas. The El Rancho resort established what's now Vegas's most iconic image, the Strip. But on June 17, 1960, a fire broke out in the casino kitchen, quickly spreading through the main building. The iconic windmill toppled in the flames, and within an hour, the entire resort was destroyed. As far as I can tell, the lot has remained empty ever since, which turns out to be true for our next stop as well. The Last Frontier Village. This was one I was really hoping was still in Vegas, but no such luck. It's just another empty lot today. The El Rancho had been a great success, and a year later, Guy McAfee sold his 91 Club to theater chain owner R.E. Griffith, who'd already built the Western-themed El Rancho Hotel in Gallup, New Mexico, and wanted to expand into Las Vegas. Griffith added on to the 91 Club, creating the Hotel Last Frontier, which opened in 1942, making it the second resort on the Strip. You can see from this aerial photo just how far out of town this new resort was. The Last Frontier Village was added 6 years later on the property's north end. It was a whole western town made from actual buildings that came from one guy's collection, Dobie Doc. Doc had a habit of collecting Western memorabilia, and by collecting I mean stealing, and by memorabilia I mean buildings. He stole the Tuscarora jailhouse, the North Fork schoolhouse, and Elko's Chinese Joss house, literally pulling up in the middle of the night, picking the building up, and hauling it away. He once made off with an entire train when the Eureka, Nevada Railroad closed down. When the Last Frontier wanted to add a themed area to their resort, they went to Doc, and he supplied everything. 3 complete railroad trains, a drugstore, general store, post office, schoolhouse, jail, Joss House, and the printing plant of the Reese River Reveille, the state's oldest newspaper. So the second resort on the Strip was Vegas's first theme resort, something that's now commonplace. The whole thing was sold back to Guy McAfee just a few years later. The resort changed names and owners many times over the years and was eventually entirely demolished in 2007. The Neon Museum did save their old sign, plus the famous Silver Slipper that sat on top of the village's Silver Slipper Saloon. And one building from the village still survives today, and that was our next target. Last Frontier's Little Church of the West. Finally, something in Las Vegas that's still the same. This little church has survived 75 years on the Strip. It was originally part of the Last Frontier Village, but instead of being demolished, was moved 3 times to its final location here, just next to the Welcome to Vegas sign. It's now listed on the Registry of Historic Places, the only listed building on the Strip, so it should be safe. The Little Church of the West has been doing weddings on the Strip for 80 years, something so popular in Vegas that the other nickname for the Strip was the Honeymoon Highway. Vegas weddings and divorces are another example of changing state regulations to attract tourists from California. If gambling wasn't legal there, it was in Vegas. Want a divorce? Just live in Vegas for 6 weeks and it's done. If California had a waiting period to get married, Vegas didn't. Vegas really leaned into making weddings easy, putting license bureaus in the train station and airport and keeping them open 24 hours, and publishing guides listing all the wedding chapels, including the first one, which was in the minister's own home. And when Hollywood stars got married, it was heavily promoted, like when William Hopalong Cassidy Boyd had a 24-hour whirlwind wedding in 1930. All the papers made sure to cover it. And when Rhea Gable wanted a divorce from movie star Clark Gable, she had to stay in Vegas for 6 weeks first, and the Chamber of Commerce made sure to publicize all the fun things she got to do on her divorce getaway. Divorce tourism got so popular that dude ranches were converted to divorce ranches, pivoting from targeting East Coast wannabe cowboys to unhappy newlywed women. And today, the marriage industry still thrives in Vegas, the divorce industry not so much, and the Little Church of the West remains a symbol of that important history. The Flamingo Hotel and Pool. The Flamingo's the only original casino on the Strip that's still there today, although it's really, really different, but the pool's still a prominent feature in the middle of the resort. It was designed by Hollywood nightclub owner Billy Wilkerson to be a more upscale, less Western option on the Strip, but Wilkerson soon ran out of money and turned famously to mobster Bugsy Siegel for financing. It was Siegel's operations moving into Los Angeles that pushed Guy McAfee out into Las Vegas. Now Siegel followed, looking to run his own casino. Although he didn't do a great job, he spent millions more than planned on his vision, and when the casino opened, the hotel part wasn't complete, so guests took their winnings to other resorts, and the Flamingo lost a lot of money. Siegel was gunned down in Beverly Hills just a few months later, and control of the casino went to other, more responsible mobsters, Mo Sedway and Gus Greenbaum. This made the Flamingo the first casino to be directly financed and operated by the mob, and it actually did really well, becoming very profitable by the end of the year. But if there's one thing mobsters don't like, it's paying taxes. And in 1950, Las Vegas Mayor Ernie Cragen wanted them to do just that. Cragen decided the city should annex the Strip, making it part of Las Vegas and forcing the casinos to pay taxes to the city. The Flamingo's Gus Greenbaum and the ever-present Guy McAfee convinced the county to create a permanently unincorporated town containing their casinos and called it Paradise. Greenbaum was Paradise's first mayor, and its council were all casino executives. Now that the Strip was in a town of its own, Las Vegas couldn't annex it, and the casinos didn't have to pay them any taxes or abide by their rules. Weirdly, it's soon after this that the county built the Welcome to Las Vegas sign and put it at the entrance to the town of Paradise, reinforcing the illusion that when you got to the Strip, you'd got to Las Vegas. The Desert Inn Swimming Pool. This one's gone now too, but at least it's not an empty lot. The site of the old resort is now home to the Wynn Casino. The Desert Inn was another partially mob-financed resort which opened in 1950 and was famous for its Sky Room restaurant, the highest vantage point on the Strip at the time. And that brings us to one of my favorite Vegas tourist attraction schemes, bomb parties. After World War II, the U.S. government needed a way to test their new nuclear bombs. They'd done a couple tests way out in the Pacific, but found that really too inconvenient. So they started looking for somewhere to test their bombs more nearby, and after briefly considering Cape Hatteras on the coast of North Carolina, they settled on land they already owned, the Las Vegas Bombing and Gunnery Range north of town. The press reported this decision, and while scientists tried to convince Vegas residents that they could sit back and relax because they probably won't see or feel the effects, the Chamber of Commerce started thinking of how to use it to attract atomic tourists. They rebranded Vegas as Atomic City and published maps and calendars showing where and when to watch the blasts. They had TV stars promote the spectacle and each year crowned Miss Atomic Blast. The Desert Inn had atomic bomb parties in their sky room and promoted the atomic cocktail, and the Sands Hotel had so many people staying with them to watch the Operation Q blast that when it was delayed, it caused quite a problem. To keep their guests entertained while they waited, they crowned one of their dancers Miss Q to celebrate another misfiring of the Operation Q bomb. Eventually, the bombs were tested underground, and the spectacle ended as quickly as it had begun, but for a few years, Las Vegas was the heart of the new atomic age. And that was the last picture we were looking for. Las Vegas is known for demolishing itself and then rebuilding itself, so I wasn't really expecting to be able to find much left from its 1950s history. And that's true for a lot of the old places we were looking for. All that remains today are empty spaces where the earliest resorts used to be. It's a city with a lot to see, and worth the visit for sure, but if you go, look for the clues to its history that are hidden around you before they're gone forever. And that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching.